I'm just going to do a quick comparison of the Z5 and the D750 and their buffer rates and the frame rate, because I don't think it's a direct translation between the two cameras. A lot of people have asked how the frame rate compares, considering the D750 has a higher frame rate than the Z5, but the D750 was notorious for having the buffer overwhelmed. No matter how fast your cards were, it would at a certain point slow down, and I usually experience this problem during first looks, first kisses. I don't usually take a high rate of shots through, at most points of the wedding day, but there are moments where I would have to ride the shutter and the camera would slow down, and I had to have a second camera while I was dual shooting ready to just switch to that if that happened. But it didn't happen often enough for me to not want to use the camera. I also use a D850, which pretty much never slows down, and that obviously is a much more capable camera than the Z5 and the D750. But what I want to do is do a comparison to see if you were to ride the shutter on the Z5 and the D750, considering the difference in frame rates, that considering the Z5 is a better buffer, if it would take more shots in the same period of time. So I'm just going to take the two cameras, hold down the shutter, and just see what happens over, you know, a certain period of time, and if one takes more shots than the other. So see what happens. So I think that video pretty effectively shows how the Z5, even though it has a slower frame rate, is actually more efficient than the D750 when it comes to capturing more moments over a certain period of time. I think the D750 is like 6.5 frames per second and the Z5 is 4.5. But after only a few seconds of shooting, the D750 slowed down substantially because it was trying to save raw and JPEGs to that card, and it's a slower card slot than the Z5. Z5 kept going, kept up a consistent frame rate all the way until 201 photos. I'm not sure why it stopped at that point. If I had taken my finger off the shutter button and then pushed it again, it would have just picked up where it left off and kept going. I did try that in a different test, but for some reason it just stopped at 200 photos. The D750 kept going, but again it was at a slower frame rate, and as you saw, there was about a 40 shot difference between the two cameras in the 30 or so seconds that I did the test. So for my needs, the Z5 is plenty. I don't need more than 4.5 frames per second. I do have a D850 if I'm shooting something that requires a higher frame rate, but I don't do sports photography or nature photography where you might need to shoot something at a higher frame rate. For me, weddings, I don't really need anything that has that kind of crazy performance. The Z5 has been more than capable in the last two weddings I've shot. I never felt like it was missing any moments because of the 4.5 frames per second. But again, that depends on your personal use. But if you're upgrading from a D750 and you are considering the Z5, I think it's plenty capable. I think you're going to notice that you are missing less moments because your buffer is not slowing down like it did with the D750. So this camera gets a big thumbs up for me. I'm really enjoying it. The autofocus I think is very capable. I still haven't had a good chance to try it out on a low lit dance floor since there's really not a real dance floor happening at weddings. I'm filming this on the 24-70 f4, and I'm curious to try this lens out on a dance floor and see how it does, if the autofocus is good. But overall, again, the camera's great. It's very lightweight. It's great to see a preview of the exposure before you take a shot. That saves me time in post with editing. There were moments I was capturing on this camera that I might have missed in the past just because I could just tap on the touchscreen and you know, to focus on a certain moment that's happening rather than having to move my focal point around like I had to do with the D750. So it's a great camera, very much happy with it, and I will do other reviews or technical feedback as I experience other aspects of this camera that I think are good or not so good. So thanks for watching.